But let's kick off today's session. Again, my name is Matthew McKnight. I'm a technical specialist at Autodesk. I work from our Melbourne office. I'm actually currently sitting in our Kilsyth office on a beautiful summer's day in Melbourne. And today we're going to be looking at CAD to VR workflow with 3ds Max Interactive. So what is 3ds Max Interactive? Now, like I said, a fortnight ago, we actually ran through a webinar that looked at some of the iterative changes of Inventor through the 2018 release cycle. And I thought I'd try and bring some awareness not only to that, but also to the fact that, like I said a little earlier in highlighting some of our previous webinars, we also made some changes in the packaging of the collection for the manufacturing industry, a rebranding from the product design collection to the product design and manufacturing collection, some inclusion of new technology such as Nastran in CAD and Autodesk HSM. And that took place in August. But actually prior to that and prior to the 2018.1 release of Inventor, Autodesk 3ds Max Interactive was announced. And this is an entitlement for customers that have, predominantly if you're a manufacturing customer, it's most likely through one of two ways that you will access this technology, and that is through either a subscription to 3ds Max, and a subscription to 3ds Max comes with the 3ds Max Interactive entitlement, or through the product design and manufacturing collection, which includes 3ds Max. Subsequently, it also includes 3ds Max Interactive. Now, this announcement came back in June. It's probably a lesser known announcement that was made. So it's rather timely, especially with a lot of the trends that are going on in the industry, that we bring some awareness into this product, but also the value of actually using it as part of your design and manufacturing workflows. Now, like I said, the product design and manufacturing collection, which had some packaging changes a little earlier, it now includes additional technology, Nastran in CAD, HSM, but underneath 3ds Max is really where 3ds Max Interactive is located, and it's through 3ds Max that customers are going to get access to the interactive capabilities of this technology. Now, for many manufacturers, and it's no different here than in our region, in Australia and New Zealand, this is what it is around the rest of the world, customers that are wanting to visualize their designs look to 3ds Max as a premier or a premium product that enables them to create animations, renderings, basically sales and marketing content, and help them sell an idea, whether that's in an early conceptual stage, maybe selling an idea or concept inside of a business, but also selling products to the end customer as well. And it's by looking at a lot of the features and functionality, you'll note that we also now have the ability to be able to create interactive experiences and virtual reality. And this has become possible through the inclusion of 3ds Max Interactive as part of that product range that enables manufacturers to be able to walk through and create 3D content. What is 3ds Max Interactive? Well, it's really a real-time engine that it extends or enables 3ds Max to go beyond what was previously capable in enabling you to create interactive and virtual reality experiences and content. So what do we mean by this? So let me give you a couple of quick examples first up to actually open your mind as to what's possible using Autodesk 3ds Max Interactive. So in this first case, we actually have a KitchenAid mixer which has been modeled up but configured using 3ds Max Interactive to create a configurator. Now, this could be used maybe as online content for your customers to be able to help them understand the product, interact with it, but also help them choose the accessories and components that they want on theirs. This could be used in a sales organization. It might be a configurator that's part of a configurator that's taken out to site and delivered this in front of a customer. It might be part of your showroom integration, creating content that enables customers to go beyond the traditional ways that we would work with static configuration of designs. Furthermore, then we have the capability to be able to leverage the content that we're creating in our CAD tools to then move this through and then simulate much more interactively than previously and much more virtually what a production facility or what a product might look like, even whether that's for design review or whether it's potentially as part of the sales and marketing process. And you can see here a quick example of a VR experience. This is actually run at Autodesk AU in Las Vegas last year in 2016, where you could walk up and actually put on a headset, a VR headset, and walk through this factory and understand access, the way things are going to be processed, material flows, all of those sorts of things that were applicable in this workspace. So there's just two quick examples of the typical ways that you can use this technology. Now today we are focused specifically on the VR, the virtual reality side of things. So we're going to be looking at how can you move from your CAD solution into the VR environment and then to start configuring your product for a VR experience. So why now? And we'll talk a little bit about now, just a little bit about the background as to why this is happening. Because if you actually look back in history, you will see that for quite some time there's been the promise that this technology is mature enough, but it's never actually gone on to be adopted significantly inside of either a consumer environment or a commercial environment. We can look back at the ViewMaster in, I think it was around the 1940s that this first came out. You're probably more familiar with the red looking one, and I remember as a kid some of my mates having access to these and using them. But it's really since the early 1900s that we actually saw the promise of virtual reality slowly grow and grow and grow. We saw various different types of headsets and units become available, but eventually it never went where we actually saw, even in the movies, a lot of promise from movies that were showing the way that we would do things in the future, but again, it never really eventuated. So why is this any different? Why is now 2017 and moving into 2018 any different than previous? It's really because of the way that hardware is changing the landscape for this industry. So it's through the likes of the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, which are readily accessible, low-cost, high-quality VR headsets or head-mounted display units, really do enable in almost anyone to be able to access this type of technology. So traditionally, potentially this was either very low quality or low grade in terms of the quality of the output from them, or they were extremely high cost. That combined with the fact that the hardware that's required to drive these is significantly improved, the performance of them, and the cost has come down significantly as well. So you could potentially get away with running a high-end gaming card, maybe $800 to $1,000, sufficient to be able to run a reasonable sized experience inside of a VR experience that we'll show today, right up to high-end CAD cards that then enable the software to really leverage high-quality, high-performance rendering, such as is possible using the likes of what we'll show today in 3ds Max Interactive, but also other technology like Autodesk Vred. And that's really the third component of this, is the fact that the software now is enabling high-quality content to be able to be delivered in certain instances in real time directly to the head-mounted displays for them to be able to feel and immerse themselves in this experience. And that is really, it's the culmination of all of those factors, the accessibility of the hardware, the price point, the quality of all of those components enable this rapid transformation in the industry and the adoption of the technology by certain industries. So where can you apply this technology into your business? Well, predominantly we're seeing two areas, typical areas where customers are looking to apply it. They're either applying it from the research and development side of things, where they want to do things like design review, or they're applying it at the sales and marketing side of things, where they're actually trying to pitch or sell an idea or a concept. So let's have a look at some of the workflows of what that might look like. So here we are, this is actually Vred, which is running a VR experience, whereby you can bring your data set in and quite quickly and easily run a design review using a range of different tools to enable that. This can run across multiple locations. Potentially you can actually have multiple users synchronized viewing the same data set across multiple locations. There's minimal data preparation associated with doing this. In most instances, you can bring your 3D CAD into these types of packages, and you can often configure this to suit your specific environment. You'll see here in the video here, we actually have access to things like rulers for measuring or flashlights to be able to see into dark or hidden areas. We can mark up the environment. We can put post-it notes. We can section our design. We can even take snapshots of the design changes that we're looking to make as in the future. So really, this does open up endless boundaries or break down the physical boundaries that's typically associated with a design review, where you can't get in and understand some of those aspects that only VR can specifically show you. And as a development tool, it's going to help you understand your products and your projects much earlier in that design life cycle, and help you hopefully avoid a lot of the potential issues that can be overlooked as part of that typical design review process. From a sales and marketing perspective, we're also seeing significant adoption of VR technology, because VR is really disruptive in that way. So, companies that would traditionally use a typical sales process of handing out things like pamphlets or having a static display at a trade show might now look to VR to be able to separate themselves away from their market competitors, but also to give their customer a unique experience. And this is what it's really about. It's about that wow factor of really being able to share something unique with the customer, give them some unique insight they might not otherwise get using the traditional sales and marketing process. We're finding, again, a lot of adoption here. You can see here that we have a custom environment that enables potentially multiple users to be able to configure a design inside of a space. They can understand the changes to the design in real time. They can work with the model. In this case, as they touch things, components will open. They can rotate things around. So there's a reasonable level of configuration and automation that's available with inside of these solutions. So again, VR as a sales tool is really a disruptive technology. It enables you to create these customizable environments where you can include your own scenes and lighting and perspective and interaction with the model. You can use real-time configuration of your designs right there with your customer, potentially with your customers in that environment, to understand the impact of their changes. It's also transportable, which is one thing that we've found, particularly as users that are trying to show the value of VR, the ability to be able to pack up one of these kits and transport it around the country or potentially even around the globe and quickly set up a VR experience right there in a customer's office or at a trade show. And really it's a differentiator. By offering VR, you will likely find a greater level of engagement from your customer because of that experience. So now we've got through a lot of the background of the whys and the whats and the wheres and so forth. Let's have a look at the how. How do you actually do this? And again, this is a technical session, so I don't want to just gloss over this. So I've gone into a reasonable amount of detail, but recognize this right from the outset, that moving to a VR solution with all of its capabilities offers almost in many respects endless capabilities in terms of customization to suit your specific requirements. So all I've really focused on here is how can you access the software and how can you create a workflow that enables you to take 3D CAD from your design solution. In this case, we're going to be focused on Inventor and Fusion 360, but it could be anything else, potentially anything else. And then go through to that 3ds Max interactive environment and then kick off a VR session. Firstly, how do you install 3ds Max Interactive? Well, most likely you're going to install 3ds Max in the first instance. And the thing to realize is you actually need 3ds Max 2018.1 or newer to be able to replicate this workflow. So typically you're going to install that. One of the best ways that you can do that is from the Autodesk desktop app. should be in your system tray in the bottom right of your Windows screen. If you click on that and open it up, you'll see all of the entitlements that you have as part of your subscription access to Autodesk software. And right at the top there, if you list them alphabetically, you should see 3ds Max 2018. Now this is going to install, by launching that, it's actually going to download and install 3ds Max onto your machine and potentially offer you any upgrades that are associated with that. Next thing you want to do is actually launch 3ds Max, and obviously you do that from the start menu, find 3ds Max, which we've got here, and on opening it up you'll actually find that the welcome screen, the typical welcome screen, and some of you may have actually dismissed this and I'll show you how to get there, but the welcome screen will actually highlight to you where you can download this. Now it's a little bit hidden. There's actually, on the welcome screen, there's about 5 or 6 different pages highlighting to you new features and new functionality that have recently been added. But what you'll find is if you flick through some of these, you will actually find that one of those will highlight 3ds Max Interactive and the technology that's included. And you'll notice, and if you click on the bottom there, you can actually cycle through them, but you'll notice that there's a download link here. Now what happens if I've dismissed the welcome screen? Well, you can actually reactivate that directly from the help menu. You'll find that there's a welcome screen option there and you can actually reopen that. So what happens from here? Well, actually what it's going to do is it'll open up a web browser and you're most likely going to be greeted, unless you've recently logged into your Autodesk account, most likely going to be greeted by a login screen asking for your credentials to your Autodesk account. So what you can do is if you want to avoid going through all of the previous steps, you can actually just go directly to your Autodesk account, which is accounts.autodesk.com, and that will actually take you to the sign-in page or the next page that I'm about to show you. And that is the account homepage. So once you've logged in, you get access to your account and it shows you some various things about your profile and your account and so forth. But it actually doesn't show you anything about your entitlements. So what we need to do is we actually need to go to the management section of the top of the page and click on management. That'll give us access to this. Now if you want to get access to here, if you've recently logged into your Autodesk account, you want to go directly there, you can actually get directly there by following the web address manage.autodesk.com, and that should take you there. Okay, so the next step is to download the 3ds Max Interactive installer. Now this is a little bit hidden. In essence, what you do is by going onto the Manage section of your account, you will be brought to the location where you should be able to find all of the information about your entitlements and access the downloads for them. Now, depending upon the way that you're accessing, that you're actually accessing 3ds Max depends on the location of the installer. So if you're subscribing to 3ds Max as an individual product, as not as part of a collection, then what you can do is you click on all products and services and you should find that you'll find the 3ds Max installer there. If you're accessing, or if your subscription is a product design and manufacturing collection, and this is how you get access to 3ds Max, and that's where I found the 3ds Max installer location. If you click on this, it should bring up all of your entitlements as part of the product design and manufacturing collection. And the first one of those, or one of the first ones listed there, is 3ds Max. Now, if you click on that, you'll actually find that there's a little down arrow beside it. This then expands your download options for 3ds Max, and you'll see there that the latest version, along with numerous previous versions, are available for you to download as part of your entitlements. All you have to do is click on Downloads, and that then should enable you to be able to see that inside of 3ds Max there's actually the 3ds Max Interactive installer. And what you can do is you can click Download Now, you can look at the other download methods, and you can download via your browser, which is what I commonly do, is actually download the installer files through Chrome and then simply activate that afterwards. But essentially, once you've downloaded the installers, all you need to do is really run the installer and install the software like you would any other Autodesk piece of software. So there you have, install 3ds Max 2018.1 or newer is required, launch 3ds Max. You can go to the download section from the welcome screen. If you don't want to do that, maybe you're not installing 3ds Max and you want to download Interactive separately, you can go directly to your account.autodesk.com or manage.autodesk.com, log in to your account, and then access it through the download area where your entitlements are. So what does the workflow look like of going from CAD to VR? So what I'm going to do is actually highlight to you two ways. One is the traditional way, and I think this is really the way that the workflow has been designed to evolve, to been, for you to take as users of 3ds Max Interactive. But I'm also going to look at an option two, which is a little bit slightly different, and it's something that I realized as a part of creating the content for this webinar. So the first option is, like I said, through 3ds Max. First thing you do is start with a model, and that's what we've done here. We are, in this first instance, we're actually going to use Inventor, and we'll run a model that's reasonably typical of some type of model that most of our customers in Australia might be making. So it's fabricated, it's got sheet metal, it's a welded structure, it's got standard components inside of there, it's got almost everything, every type of geometry creation technique has been included in here, including it's an assembly, not a single part. So how do we then, move that model from Inventor through to 3ds Max Interactive? First thing we need to do is import the CAD file into 3ds Max. And we can do this because 3ds Max has quite an extensive array of file formats that it can work with. You can actually see here that some of the most common 3D CAD file formats are available. So it doesn't matter whether you're an Inventor user. You could be using CATIA, you could be using SolidWorks, you could be using NX. You could actually even be translating files into a file format that's an intermediary file like an IGES or a step file. So there's the possibility for you to be able to work with the majority of the most common file formats in our industry. Then what you're going to do is you're going to prepare the model. You're going to apply materials, adjust its orientation, and anything else that you think is necessary before moving it through to 3ds Max Interactive. Now, I'm not going to focus too much on all of the things that you could do inside of 3ds Max. All I'm really going to do is focus on porting this information into 3ds Max. So here we are inside of 3ds Max. All I'm going to do is go to my import option here. You'll see that I've got by default it's going to show any of the standard formats that it can import because we've selected all files. But again, we can use a number of different file formats from other typical CAD solutions inside of the industry. One thing you'll note, I haven't adjusted anything apart from the orientation to align the y-axis as the vertical direction. Now it does take about a minute because it's translating all of that data from a solid model inside of a mechanical CAD package into mesh data for 3ds Max to work with. And you'll see here the other thing that happens as a part of that translation is it groups everything together. So even though we had components and sub-assemblies and so forth inside of our Inventor assembly, in essence we've grouped this. You can ungroup these by going to Group, Ungroup, and that will then enable you to work with these individually. So maybe you want to adjust the look or the location of a specific item within inside of this environment. Maybe you want to remove it completely. Well, the best way that you can do that when transferring the data through to 3ds Max is to ungroup those and then potentially regroup them later on if need be. Okay, so now what's the next step? Well, the next step we need to do is open 3ds Max Interactive. 3ds Max Interactive will show us a template opening page or welcoming page that will enable us to quickly and easily configure 3ds Max Interactive specifically for a VR environment. And then what it does is it compiles that VR environment ready for us to be able to insert our geometry into that. So let's have a quick look at that workflow and what it looks like. So here we are, we've instigated the process of starting 3ds Max Interactive. You'll see that there's a number of pre-configured templates for all kinds of different environments. So HTC Vive, Oculus Rift, but also VR goggles, VR Google via the like Google Cardboard, or even a VR gear. So there's a range of different pre-configured environments specific to the output that you're intending to achieve. And you can create all of these. Now, it does take a few minutes to actually create this because it's bringing together all of the content and configure that environment. I think on my machine it was probably about 3 minutes to be able to run this, so I have cut some of that time out. But at the end of that, it's created this environment for you to be able to place your component and be able to very quickly and easily interact with the object. There's nothing stopping you from creating similar type of templates, so you could potentially even take this template and then reconfigure that space to be symbolic of the type of environment that you want your design reviews or your customer experiences to be in. So this one here is the default one. It's got a lot of objects in it that you can actually walk around and pick up and manipulate. But the reality is that you could really configure this space to be whatever you want it to be, and then configure that workspace to be a template that then you use down the path to create your own quick environments to be able to bring content into. So once we've created the environment, then what we can do is we can export or import this information from 3ds Max. And why I said export and import, well, there's actually two ways that you can go about this process. The first instance, what you can do is you can actually use the game exporter from 3ds Max to be able to export the geometry out. In essence, what this does is it creates an FBX file, which in essence is in much the reason, it's predominantly the reason why we're actually going through 3ds Max, is to be able to convert the data into an FBX format that's prepared for the environment that we're going to bring it into inside of 3ds Max Interactive. The other way is actually to use the 3ds Max Interactive connector. And by installing 3ds Max and then 3ds Max Interactive, we actually get the ability to be able to connect those two environments together and then share information from 3ds Max up to 3ds Max Interactive, so that in the future, if we wanted to, maybe we wanted to change the appearance or the geometry of a part, we can actually go back to 3ds Max, we can make those changes and then resync the changes back through to 3ds Max Interactive. And that's what the panel looks like here. You know, you can see down the bottom we've got it's disconnected. It basically is saying that it's not connected to a live session of 3ds Max Interactive. If there is one open, we can connect that, and then we can start sending information between 3ds Max and 3ds Max Interactive. So what does this look like? So we'll have a look at a couple of different workflows. In the first case, we'll just do a simple export using the game exporter. And like I said before, I'm not going to adjust any of the settings. One of the things you want to do is just make sure that you've got the orientation right with your model. In this case, I'm going to leave it the same way as we had previously. Choose the path where I'll export the file to. Give the file a name, and then we'll export this, and it's essentially going to create an FBX file containing any of the information that we've specified inside of 3ds Max. Now the next thing we can do is connect to an open session of 3ds Max Interactive, which we've done. So in the background, 3ds Max Interactive's running, and then we can send, what we're doing here is sending all, so any geometry inside of this environment to 3ds Max Interactive. You'll note that what it does is actually switches to 3ds Max Interactive. That opens up the import dialog box. Now, I'm going to show you a different way of getting to this import dialog box. So you could have just said yes, okay, and imported the geometry. But you'll notice that under the asset browser, we also have the import option. So navigating through the structure of this, all of the assets inside of this environment, you'll see that we have a props area. And this is where a lot of the other components inside of this spaces have been located. So what I'll do is I can import the FBX that we previously exported using the game exporter into, and this again brings up the same dialog box as what we've previously seen. Now you can choose the settings you want. I've chosen to put all materials into a subfolder so that it's kept nice and neat inside of this space. And we can now see that the blower export is now available to us inside of the asset browser, where we can move through and actually locate this component. Now, typical of most CAD programs, we've got manipulators that enable us to quickly and easily move and nudge the geometry around in this space. We can rotate, we can pan, we can zoom, and depending upon where we're moving, we can do this inaccurately, so we can drag it, or we can do it accurately using dimensions if we want to, and we can even snap two objects if necessary. So there's an ability to be able to quickly and easily move this geometry into the scene. Now, I'm not overly concerned about its location or orientation or any of those sorts of things, because in this instance, what we're potentially going to be doing is just a quick design review. But if you are going to create a sales environment, you'd be more particular about where this component's going to be located, the materials that are coming through with it, and all of those things that we otherwise don't have time to sort of step through today, unfortunately. So the next step is we're going to run or deploy to VR. So what do we mean by run or deploy? Well, we've got the ability to be able to run a session directly inside of 3ds Max Interactive. And this enables us to effectively to share that information directly to a headset that we've got connected to our desktop or our machine that we're running from. Or we've got the ability to be able to deploy an executable package that can work off numerous different platforms, and it pre-configures that into an executable file that can effectively be run by anyone that wants to be able to access those files. So here we go. Let's have a look at this workflow. You'll note that here we are again inside of Interactive. I'm launching this by hitting up in the top left corner, the little green play button, and this actually starts the environment. Now, one thing you'll notice, it doesn't look very VR or virtual in my environment. That's because the recording that I did of this, I didn't actually have a HTC Vive hooked up to my machine, so I was unable to actually get the VR aspect of it running. But you realize that in many respects it's no different. So if you've got the headset hooked up, it should then enable you to port this information through. Now we can package this by going to the ability to be able to the deployer, and the deployer enables us to quickly and easily then deploy this, like I said, as an executable. It takes about 30 to 60 seconds to be able to deploy a package of this size, and then that folder structure then contains all of the information necessary to be able to run this as a VR experience on your specific headset that you've chosen to deploy to. So there you have it. That's option one from CAD. So we've gone from Inventor through to 3ds Max. We're using 3ds Max to then set up our model, apply any appearances that we want, manipulate the geometry if we feel as though we have to, and then port that information through to 3ds Max Interactive, where we can then run a VR session. Now, in many respects, it's no different to, whether it's Inventor, it could be any other potential CAD product that you want to as well. And you saw that there's a wide range of manufacturing file formats that can be imported into 3ds Max. So in many respects, the workflow doesn't change. But what happens if you wanted to look at a slightly different workflow? And this came about in doing a little bit of research about the workflow from CAD to 3ds Max Interactive. And I actually heard someone mention about the ability to be able to move data through Fusion 360. Now, I say move data through, you actually might be using Fusion 360. In many respects, that's a very simple workflow to actually go from Fusion to a VR experience. So, but there's also the possibility of you to go from a CAD solution such as Inventor or SolidWorks through Fusion 360 if you feel more familiar in that environment than say you do with 3ds Max, and be able to send that information through in a format that 3ds Max Interactive can work with. So let's have a look at this option 2 via Fusion 360. So the first thing we need to do is start with the model. We're going to use a same model in this instance. Now the model can actually come in any number of formats. What I've done is I've exported the same model out of Inventor as a step format and imported into Fusion 360. But we'll discuss some other workflows a little bit later that are actually quite exciting and may open up opportunities for you to leverage other ways of getting your CAD data through to Fusion 360 and then into a VR environment. In this environment, what you want to do is you want to prepare the model inside of Fusion. You can apply materials or appearances. You can change the orientation, suppress components and the likes. There's a wide range of capabilities of things that we might want to do inside of Fusion 360. So let's have a quick look at what this looks like. So here we are, effectively the same data set as what we had previously inside of Fusion. And what we'll do is we'll change the appearance of some of the components. Now I've just randomly selected any materials here. They're not specifically chosen. I'm not going to make a structural member out of leather, and I'm probably not going to choose a lot of the different materials that I did choose here. But really what I wanted to do is just show or highlight to you the fact that we can quite quickly and easily apply various different materials of various different types onto this model, and then have that information then flow through to 3ds Max Interactive, where it'll become part of that VR environment that we're creating. So you can see here I've gone through and chosen quite a few different options that I want to, different types of appearance that I'm going to apply to my part. Now you might have actually done this as part of your modeling, so you mightn't even need to necessarily do this if this is what you're using Fusion 360 for. So you have a whole bunch of different appearances. We'll close that dialog box and we'll save the part. This is important, saving the part before you do it. Why is that important? Because the next aspect of the next process as part of this workflow is to be able to export the file to an FBX format. Now, if you're a Fusion 360 user, you might have actually seen that the export options inside of Fusion 360, the local install of the product, is somewhat limited. But there is some hidden capabilities inside of what's called Fusion Team that enables you to be able to export a much wider range of file formats, and we'll show some of those. You can see a list of them there, including the FBX option towards the bottom. This, in doing so, will actually then send you a link to the FBX file where you can download that and put it in your file structure, and then in preparation for uploading to 3ds Max Interactive. So what does that workflow look like? So again, here we are inside of Fusion 360. You'll note if we go to File, Export, the options that are available are somewhat limited. I just sat SMT and step files. So we've got the 4 different options there that we can export. But like I said, we want to be able to create this as a FBX file format. So if you go down into the data panel and you expand the version history of your part, you'll see here we've got an option to open details in web or in the browser. And what this does is actually opens a session of Fusion Team where the data, when we saved previously, has been synced. Remember, Fusion is a cloud-based system enabling you to share information across various different devices. You'll see here that by opening this in a browser, and this is just running from Chrome, we can actually see the component with the materials that we've applied and all of their varieties. And if we go to the export option in the top right of the screen, you'll see here that we have an option to be able to export this as an FBX file. You'll note that the option that, well, the dialog box that returns as a result of that is actually stating that we'll be sent a link to our registered email address, that our account is linked to, and that will then give us the file that we're after. So we've done that. What's next? We're going to open the 3ds Max, we'll open 3ds Max Interactive, we'll import the file, and then we're simply going to run or deploy to VR. So again, this is very similar to the workflow that we've seen previously. In essence, it's basically the same as what we've shown before. We'll go into this environment, and that's going to enable us to deploy to a VR package. So here we are inside of Interactive. Again, the same workspace. We've just created a new environment through the same process from the startup menu. We will navigate down to the props area, which is where we went to before. I'm going to import. You'll note that I've got a separate FBX file called Blower Fusion 360. I can choose again, I'm going to create a materials folder that'll put all the materials in there so that they're not in that top level folder. And we'll import that in. It'll translate the file over. If you now navigate down, you should find that that file is now inside of this environment where we can drag this up, locate the part, rotate it around, position it. Again, if it's for design review, you mightn't be so concerned about these sorts of things. If it's a sales experience, you're probably going to be concerned about its position and the quality of the materials and the look and feel and the access and all kinds of different bits and pieces that you're not otherwise concerned about in the design review. But you can see here that we've got our part in that space. It's in preparation for then deployment, and we can deploy that. We can actually run the VR experience, and as I've shown before, if you just go up in the top left of the screen, hit the play button, you'll note that we're actually in a VR experience. And again, if we had a headset connected, we would be able to see what that environment is like. And we can go down to deploy and deploy that package as an executable file that can be run on a VR system. So there you have it. That's probably in many ways an equivalent, or possibly for some users that aren't so familiar with 3ds Max but have used Fusion or are Fusion 360 users. If you're a Fusion 360 user, it is a very simple process of actually going from Fusion 360 to 3ds Max Interactive and creating a VR setup. So that's really, the process for you. And this is really, some of the exciting things that we shared in the previous webinar, and that is around the changes to the way that Inventor and Fusion 360 are working with one another in the most recent updates. And that is that Fusion 360 is now part of the any CAD workflows inside of Inventor. So what that effectively means, and we discussed this a little bit in our previous session, is the fact that you can now port an Inventor model through to Fusion 360 using what's called the Autodesk Desktop Connector, which is syncing the information between, say, Inventor and Fusion 360. And this is maybe important for some users, because for some users that like that workflow better, they can potentially use Inventor models inside of Fusion 360 where they can apply materials and configure the items in preparation for insertion into 3ds Max Interactive using the FBX export option that we showed. And we've seen this, that this is, again, this maybe in last week we talked about how the Fusion to Inventor offering enable you to do things like industrial design or ECAD or supply chain workflows, but potentially even it's enabling you to expand on that with certain things like VR as well. So there you have it. That's really what the information that I wanted to run through today in terms of showing you how that you can get information through. There is obviously a lot more to creating a VR environment other than simply what we've done there. There's certain aspects about applying appearances and correctly positioning models in 3ds Max. There's a lot of information associated with how you can configure the VR environment, either to create your own custom environment, to work with existing ones, but then also the experience as well, the ability to be able to walk up and touch aspects of the design that will then move or manipulate, potentially even pick up objects inside of that space. And so these are all aspects of the VR interactive experience through 3ds Max Interactive that other resources are going to help you with. So what are those? So if you're looking for some of this, YouTube is a great place to start. This is where I started out by looking for content and found a wealth of information. There's actually a great learning channel called Autodesk Stingray learning channel. And the reason why it's called Stingray is actually the engine driving that 3ds Max interactive experience that you're experiencing. In many ways, the products are very, very similar, if not the same as one another in most aspects. The fact is that you can go on here and you can learn from iterative tutorials, how you can import data, how you can set up an environment, how you can change that environment, how you can interact with objects. There is a lot of information that you can see there. Just two of the ones that I've looked at is the introduction and basics and importing assets and shaders to Stingray. So there's a whole bunch of technology there. What happens if you're craving some more information? Well, actually one of the great areas that I've found about VR content, especially with towards the end of this year, is the Autodesk University recordings. And that is because at Autodesk AU, which was held in November of this year, there was a bunch of people that presented some really interesting workflows and concepts about using VR as part of their design workflow across a variety of industries. This is not just manufacturing. And so you have a range of recordings that you have access to, including the likes of an introduction to scripting in Stingray. So if you want to go in there and script and customize that environment, there's information about how you can do that. Factory workflows, so how you can use VR as a part of your factory design workflow, and also gamify your design awesome experiences with Inventor and Stingray. So again, it's leveraging the knowledge of working with your 3D design asset and your CAD system, in this case Inventor, right through to that final product inside of Stingray or 3ds Max Interactive. If you're looking for more resources, you'll find, as you always do with most of the Autodesk products, an extensive list of resources within inside of the help file that give you information about things like the user interface, setting up projects, common tools that you might use, and the navigation around that environment, using content, setting up lighting and rendering, how you can even integrate audio as part of that experience as well, getting started in VR, and right through how you can deploy and build a package to run on a VR system. So there is a bunch of information that's available out there to users that are looking for more resources about this across multiple different locations. So otherwise, what I want to do is just say thank you. I know it's late in the year, it's late in the week, and it's a busy time of the year. So we've actually had a really strong attendance to this webinar. So thank you for attending. I appreciate your time so close to Christmas. And what I want to do is just let you know that if you're looking for further information about the workflows that we've talked about, or the products that we've talked about in those workflows, please don't hesitate to reach out to your local resellers for further information. You can find information about them at the link shown there. But you can also reach out to me directly if you'd like. My contact details are there in email, and I'm more than happy to connect with you on LinkedIn and try and assist you understand these workflows a little bit better and help you problem solve some of the issues that you might otherwise be having. Otherwise, I just want to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year to everyone. Hope everyone gets a nice break during this time of summer and comes back refreshed for 2018. Hopefully we see you at our other webinars in the new year, and until then, enjoy your break. Bye for now.